Are you eating with the health of your brain in mind? Your cognitive function? Well, if you are, you may have heard of the MIND diet, or certainly you've heard of the Mediterranean. And if you haven't heard of MIND, it's a blend of Mediterranean and DASH, which was meant for hypertension. It's basically whole foods, low sodium kind of a diet. So this recent study, just published in July, New England Journal of Medicine, is testing the MIND diet, which is Mediterranean and DASH combination, that is theoretically supposed to be good for your mind, preventing neurodegeneration, against a control diet. And the intervention was, okay, the MIND is like high greens, high beans, high whole grains, high, well, these aren't necessarily high, but this is the groups that they are considering. These groups, olive oil, fish and poultry, nuts, berries, you know, the works, that kind of a regular Mediterranean style diet. And the urging was, can you try to have a little bit of calorie restriction? We want a mild caloric restriction. Maybe lose some weight. Control, no restrictions at all, except, hey, mild caloric restriction, maybe lose some weight. Both of the groups were of people who are at least overweight, if not obese. They were at least BMI of 25 plus, and they had family history of dementia. So they were very motivated. They wanted to lose some weight. They wanted to take care of their brains. They both had intensive counseling, and this was a 3-year trial. So there was a long time for everyone to kind of get in their groove, figure out what they liked, figure out how to eat, and just carry on with the trial. So the 3 results came in, they did the analyses, and what did they find? No significant difference. They did cognitive testing, a battery of cognitive tests, each group, no significant difference. They did brain imaging, MRIs, no significant difference. The one thing that was similar as well, no significant difference, was they both groups lost between 10 and 11 pounds on average. So they did successfully lose some weight. They were keeping their calories down, but it wasn't the promise of the MIND diet. That was not fulfilled. So what are we going to learn from this? There were instructions in the intervention group to eat these certain things, to not eat sweets, sugary foods, processed meats, fatty foods, fried foods, margarine, butter, cheese, or restricting cheese and that kind of, they restricted these things. I think sugar was 4 servings per week of anything that was sweetened. The other group, they were just trying to have a weight loss diet. They were trying to cut their calories. So they probably did sort of the same thing, like, well, let's stay away from those fatty food, fried foods. Let's not add a bunch of sugar in our diets because we're trying to, cut calories. So the question may be, rather than having people try to eat certain things, what they're including, which were, they're really good foods. Lots of whole foods, lots of plant material, polyphenols, and anti-inflammatory. Maybe instead of, though, what they're including is what they're not including. Maybe it's that they're not having a lot of sugar. They're not having ultra-processed foods. They're not having seed oils like canola oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, which are all shown to be inflammatory. Maybe that is what had been shown to be so useful in the MIND diet previously, because that's how they based the study. That's what they are basing this trial on, this randomized control trial, was observational studies of that kind of eating in the past. They said, oh, these people, these large groups, tend to eat this kind of food and they tend to have better health. But that wasn't proven out in a controlled environment. So this trial was controlled, and it didn't prove that that was great for their brains, that their cognitive decline or their cognitive performance was any better. So there's also another thing with these observational studies, is that people who tend to eat a lot of fresh food and who tend to not be overweight. They have this array of non-ultra processed foods. They're generally more expensive because we know ultra processed is cheap, cheap, cheap. They tend to have higher incomes. They tend to have better health care. They tend to have higher education. So there are a lot of these factors that play in. It gets kind of complicated. But we need to keep that in mind, because what ends up happening, and this is really the message I want you to have, is that what ends up happening is people say, oh, blueberries are magic. Olive oil is magic. Beans are magic. There's this magic that goes along with when people think about these foods, and then they start to get very pigeonholed in their beliefs about what is a good thing to put in your mouth and what is not. So I just want you to have sort of a bigger picture of what science in nutrition has to deal with and the quality of evidence that comes out. A lot of times you really need to look at, where did they draw their conclusions from? Is this observational? Was it just sort of a big group that they saw some trends with? Or was this a controlled trial that they really did dial in what the person could and couldn't eat, or could for how many servings per week? And what was the difference between that and a group that didn't follow those tight rules? So I am not encouraging you to go out and eat a bunch of sugar or salamis or anything like that. I still think in general, the rules around having the Mediterranean style eating are very good, but don't get so locked into it thinking that's the only way to eat, or any other diet, carnivore all the way to vegan. I mean, there's just such a spectrum of people who are so trenched in with their idea that this is the way for everyone to eat. And that just isn't so. We're all diverse, and the data is not necessarily very strong. So I encourage you, stay away from the junky stuff. This is always the bottom line. Stay away from that junky, sugary stuff, the ultra processed foods. Eat a lot of whole foods, vegetables, fruits, meats, all the whole foods, okay? And you'll probably have a good time with your diet and your weight as well. All right, until next time.